Hello and welcome back to Cornell University's virtual office hours for food safety. I'm Abby Snyder. I'm an associate professor of microbial food safety at Cornell, and today we are bringing you a session on product labeling. So if this is a topic that you're interested in, do know that the Dairy Foods Extension Program is offering a full labeling workshop on October 22nd via Zoom. So we'll share more details about that later, and information will be available in the chat. Today we are joined by two speakers. So first up, we're going to have Kathy Laviolette. Kathy has 26 years with New York State Department of Ag and Markets, currently with the Division of Milk Control and Dairy Services, leading the Compliance and Enforcement Unit. She continues to also be the sole dairy labeling expert for New York State, and Kathy has vast labeling knowledge of the Code of Federal Regulations and Pasteurized Milk Ordinance. So following Kathy's presentation, then we'll hear from Melanie Neumann. Melanie is the principal attorney and founder of NAS, or Neumann Advisory Services. She has invested over 25 years in providing the food and beverage industry with actionable and practical legal, scientific, and enterprise risk management solutions on everything from food law and regulatory compliance, advertising and labeling compliance, intellectual property, corporate contracting, data management, pre-acquisition due diligence, supplier and co-manufacturing contracting, and risk assessment, recall, and incident management, as well as other operational and brand reputation risk management solutions. So after those presentations, we will, as always, stop the recording for a closed Q&A. And then joining our speakers, we have Frank Joyce, the Regulatory Compliance Manager from Byrne Dairy, joining that panel for the discussion. So I have the list of questions that you pre-submitted when you registered, but you can also feel free to drop questions into chat at any time. Either you can DM me directly if you want to keep it confidential, or you can just put it in the open chat and I'll pull from there too. But with that, I'm going to turn it over to Kathy for the first talk.
Great. Thanks so much. And I'm so happy to be here. Labeling is my passion, so I'm really happy to present some information here. And like you said, we do have another labeling course next week, and we'll talk more about that. So let me see if I can share my screen with you. And hopefully you're all able to see that. Great. So I'm gonna kind of just go through the essentials of navigating labeling. What does that mean? How does that affect those out there, both industry as well as consumers? And I kind of just jump right in. So what labeling to start off with is what are you making? How are you making it? Where are you sending it? Is it in state, out of state, international? Those type of things. Those are all going to matter on what regulations actually apply to you and how those regulations apply to the product. Interstate is going across state lines, and for the most part, that can go. Products can go across state line pretty easily for the most part. When it gets into the grade A products on dairy end of things, that's a little bit more intricate with a program specific for that. So there's a little bit more regulations that come into that aspect of it. Intrastate, just within a state. So if you're making product within the state, not going out of that state. So you have those state regulations and perhaps some federal regulations that state has either adopted or is using as guidance. And then internationally, of course, international, those regulations that we use here in the US really don't apply so much to those products anymore. Then there's a whole nother set of regulations internationally, and that's going to be the Codex Alimentarius. And there's, specific regulations for products going internationally. Who is governing these products and your facilities? Obviously, the U.S. Food and Drug Administration. They are the first and foremost that's regulating basically the product, your facility in some way, and of course the labeling of that. We see that through the CFR, Code of Federal Regulations. That's where the majority of these regulations are coming from. There are some other sets of regulations under the Food and Drug administration that come into play depending on what the product type is and claims and those things. But the majority of it is under the Code of Federal Regulations. And there's also guidance documents that come out through FDA as well throughout the years, depending on if they're working on trying to update a regulation or just change things to be more consistent with the industry processes and standards and those type of things. You have USDA, they come into play, especially with organic labeling, with other meat products and those type of things. So you have USDA in that. And then our state agencies. So, every state agency can choose to adopt or use the federal regulations or not. And then you have their own state regulations as well, if they choose to make specific regulations within that state. So they can always be more strict. They have to be at the minimum of what the federal regulations are, but they can certainly be more strict within their own regulations. And we do see that, in various aspects of having specific regulations in one state and not another. And how does that affect a company when they have product going across state lines? Those are all things that you obviously need to be concerned with, and how to work through that, and getting your labels reviewed, right? So that's the number one thing, getting them reviewed by somebody that is well-versed on the regulations. May that be somebody within your company, or hiring a outside, consultant or somebody, firm to help you, and working with the other state agencies that your product's going into. I have some statistics, because the most concerning part of this is the labeling in itself really is usually the first and foremost fun thing that folks, when they start to market their product, but it really can be detrimental. And the concern of the health and safety aspect of it is really where we want to hit home here, because the statistics is for product recalls. Currently in 2025, we have 83 recalls just this year for undeclared ingredients. Most of them which are allergens. So that is very concerning, because obviously we have, health and safety with potential detrimental outcomes to consumers as well as your business. Now, last year we had 92 of the same types of recalls from the entire year. And we have an average about 8 recalls a month. And just looking at those statistics, when I was pulling some of this data, I could see that's an average, but certainly in some months it may be as high as 14, and as little as 4 in another month, but average 8. And if you look at that data, and we're already in October and 83 this year, we look at average of 8, we're going to be clearly up to almost 100 if that stays true for the end of this year. So are we getting any better? No. And this is why we're doing this today, is to try to get some information out there of why this is important, and to take time for your labeling and really have the help that you need when you're not sure of how these things interact with your food and the label, and then moving it across whatever market it's going in. So it also hits every food category. It's not just one category, it can be anything, right? And it's across everything. And for us here in New York, I'm doing labeling reviews, and been doing them for 20 plus years. So when I've conducted label reviews, most of the time, 8 out of the 10 labels that I look at do have violations. So it's concerning in that respect. And it does take potentially 3 revisions to work with a company to get everything into compliance on that label. We do not require label reviews in New York. Now other states do. And that we're doing it as a courtesy. And we're here to help you, and that's what we want for you, is to be able to know that you have an accurate label before it's out in the market. This is just a collection of things to look at. News alerts, they're all over the place. Undeclared allergens and undeclared ingredients that are potentially life-threatening, and it is can affect anybody, right? And what are you doing in your facility? How are you taking action, and who's reviewing your labels or the product identity and supplies and all of those things? Do you have folks that are assigned to that? And if you don't, maybe those are things you take away from today, that you get that you end up looking into that a little bit further in your facility, and being able to assign some more roles to take more action on looking at your labels and what supplies are coming in, and is everything declared appropriately. So, the biggest thing here we're talking about is ingredients, and that is our biggest part. Obviously, there's other issues with labels, but undeclared ingredients, it can happen to anybody. It still keeps happening. And that's what we want to hit home here, is that we're not seeing a decrease in it. It's either maintaining or even sometimes increasing. And these companies here that are in these news articles, I'm sure there's never been a time that somebody hasn't already heard of somebody else being in the news or something else happening. I'm sure this is not the first time this particular situation has been come up in their world of knowing that this exists. So and then moving on to press releases. This is just a handful. I mean, like I said, all those recalls, 90 some odd in 2024, and we got up to 83 now in 2025. This is just a handful that I gathered from both of those years. They're again, it hits everybody. It's not just one type of mislabeled product. We have undeclared eggs and soy and milk and sesame, and it keeps happening. Now, again, these companies, I'm sure, have not had a moment when they weren't aware that this has affected somebody else, but yet it affected them, and they are now, taking action to remedy that situation. And in some cases, it can be detrimental to those businesses. And where it really is the concern is deaths. We don't want this to happen, but it does. So I have a few here. January 2024, and this person died of an anaphylactic shock based on having an undeclared allergen in the food that person consumed. It's happening. January 2024, it happened. It can happen to your companies if you're not taking action on what's going on your label and who's keeping track of that. So maybe you do the label once, but who else is keeping track of that from then on? In December 2017, this was in England. So again, this isn't just the US, it's not just New York, it's hitting everybody. Again, allergic reactions, and two separate reactions from the same facility on different occasions. So they are still happening even after they already had one. That is an issue, and we want to make sure that folks are able to look into their labeling and keep track of that supply chain and do what's best because of this. And more death, right? So another one, November 2024, May 2025, again, it's still happening. So how does that play a role with what you do and how you do it? First of all, you need to know what is, the regulation and what you're up against. The federal regulations obviously come into play first and foremost, and then you have your state regulations, and this is for every product. It's not specific to any one product. You have 3 types of violations: misbranded, your adulterated, and your substandard. The first one and foremost is really what we're talking about on the label and the labeling is misbranded. And there's many things that can be minor misbranding and and of course, the higher major concerns are allergens and other undeclared ingredients that may affect somebody's health. Of course, nutrition is also can be affecting safety and health of a consumer, and that would also fall under the misbranded part of that label. Adulterated and substandard really fall into the food part of it, not the label, but it goes hand in hand with your label, depending on how you've labeled it and what that product is, and what's expected to be in that product or not in that product. And so your packaged food needs to meet the regulations and be in compliance, or you're violating one or more of these. How do you avoid any of these concerns? Is, the first thing is you may get some complaints, right? If you don't have a proper label or food product, and they're, thinking of, the consumer may think that you're not putting everything on the label accurately, if that's nutrition facts or just the way that it's the product name on there, false advertising, that type of thing. So first and foremost, you might get some complaints. It may get elevated to a point where there's warning letters coming from a state agency and or federal agency. And then it could go to a higher extent where you're getting monetary penalty action if you're not taking those corrections, and getting things fixed in a timely manner. And then, of course, the higher concern from there is things that need to take action immediately, where you're quarantining or seizing a product. And then finally, that recall, which again is the most detrimental, obviously, to consumers in some respect, and then your business as well. So how do you keep from any of this? Is again making sure you have the right information and reviewing your label and getting that in compliance right from the start, and not getting into any one of these situations. In New York, we actually do a pretty extensive label review in our Division of Milk Control and Dairy Services end of it. We do everything. Product identity, we look at make processes, we look at what you're putting in there, what's going on the label, how, your nutrition facts, your net contents, pretty much anything and anything on that label, and how that equates to what you're making and how you're making that we're going to look at that. It's not required in New York for those reviews to happen. We do that as a courtesy, and we hope that you utilize that service. Again, other states do charge, and they also do require, and that's kind of, a difference between different states all over the place. There isn't any one specific, regulation on it. They can all do what they want. So again, some require that, some don't, and some charge and some don't. We are a free service, and we're doing it for you as a consumer and you as a manufacturer and processor. Our Division of Food Safety also reviews labels, a little bit not as extensive. They did years ago have a label person who had retired. They have since not really been able to fill that job to full capacity, and having the background of that knowledge. It takes, years to really know some of this. So they do a little bit less extensive review compared to what we do, but we'd like you to use this service. And we also have next week our labeling workshop. So we want folks to be able to be involved in that and get the information that we are presenting in that workshop, which is basically a full review, a full overview of everything that you would need on a label: product name, net contents, nutrition facts, ingredients, how to put that on the label, sizes, font sizes, locations, If you have multiple labels or one label, those are all things we are going to be going over and reviewing in this labeling course. So we really would love for you to be able to participate in that and, gain some more knowledge in that respect. And I'm going to try to close this up with importance of time and, planning ahead. What I see in compliance and enforcement for the last, several years that I've been in this is that, the marketing of your product is the fun part, right? You finally get to design a label and put the graphics and all of that on there, and people are more take more time into getting their graphics of all of those things and the fun blurb about their company, and they don't focus on the actual parts of the regulations that are meaningful for you and the consumer in the long run. So plan ahead and don't wait to the last minute, because what I've seen as well is that when your company's just starting up, they actually spend a lot of time, getting the facility, the equipment, and all of that. And in the back of their mind, they know they have this label that they want to create, and then just weeks prior to their opening, they're starting to work on the label, and they think they can throw it our way, get it reviewed like within a day or two, and off to the printer. And that's really not the reality of it. It does take a while for review. We have a queue, we have a lot of labels in queue for review, so you're going to be in that. And again, other states require it, so I can't tell you specifically what their time frame is on reviews. But if you don't take the opportunity to utilize that, or if it's required, depending on the state that you're in, and you have a product out in the marketplace, it needs to be in compliance. And once it's not, we have, obviously our inspectors and other regulatory agents are able to pull that product from the shelf at any point and review it and take action from there. So plan ahead. Think about the product development, think about the label design, the review and the approval process, the revision and the redesign that may need to happen. And I just said earlier, it takes almost 3 revisions before I see somebody in compliance. So that's all timing. Your packaging, your supply, all of those things. And then the final printing, take that time when you first start thinking about making this product is work on that ahead of time and do it once. It's cost effective. What our goal when we're looking at compliance and enforcement is obviously the regulations, but we're also trying to suggest to you how to make one label effectively and how you can use that, because obviously we know the labeling supply companies do not want you to buy a small quantity. They want to give you, the best deal, and they want you to buy thousands and thousands of labels. And we understand that, but we want you to be able to get it right first, because that's a lot of money. And then you have a lot of labels if it's wrong. And in some instances, if it's minor, we may let you ride that out for a short time. There's no regulation specifically, but there are some, good practices that we all as regulatory agents allow for minor issues. But when it's major, you're gonna not be able to use that label, and it could be thousands of labels that you've just spent money on. So do it once, it's cost effective, and most importantly, it saves lives, right? Take the time, work through it, and consistently look at that. Once you've made that label and we've reviewed it, or you've had somebody else review it, and it's in compliance, down the line, a week from now, a month from now, 2 months from now, who else is looking at that? If you're reprinting that label at some point, maybe it's the same label you had reviewed, but it's getting reprinted. Did somebody really review that and make sure the supply is the exact same supply of ingredients and other things that still are the same for that product? That's the stuff that we want you to take action now and be able to know that things are not going to go the wrong way for you or the consumer. And that's what I have for you today. Again, we're here for your services. We're here for questions, labeling reviews, product identity, whatever we can help you with, we're here to help you. And I turn it back over to our other folks here with Cornell. Thank you.
Thank you, Kathy. We're going to turn it over to Melanie for the next presentation, and after that will be Q&A. So Claudia, I see your question in the chat, but I'm going to kick that can down the road for just 1 second until our speakers complete their talks.
Hello, everyone. I am just pulling up my screen. Can you all see it? Yes. Okay, excellent. So, I'm Melanie. I'm going to take a totally different bent to this topic. So if anyone's ever met me before, that's totally normal for me to do. But it all comes back to things that can trip you up and get you into trouble that land on your label. So I'm going to take this from a little different perspective, as Kathy mentioned and did a great job. So labeling is regulated by FDA at the federal level and by states at the state level. But other things you put on your package or on your, broadly speaking, label are regulated by another regulatory agency called the Federal Trade Commission. So you'll probably see a few acronyms here of FTC for short. So why we're also talking about this is what you say about your product on your packaging or on your website, in pieces of paper or brochures that are included in your product shipments, all equate to advertising regulated by the FTC. So the FTC is looking, FDA may be looking because they're looking for label compliance, but they also regulate certain types of claims like nutrient content claims, health claims, structure function claims. FTC is looking for things, other things that very broadly speaking will trigger a misbranding or a false and misleading advertising claim if it is false or misleading in any particular. I believe that's how it's actually codified in the regulatory language. So it does matter to take a minute to, understand where claims can also get you into regulatory non-compliance situations. Most claims need to be supported by some level of substantiation. Substantiation is proof it to me, right? So most claims need competent and reliable scientific evidence to be able to make it. Certain claims require even higher levels of substantiation. I've got a slide of that in a moment. This applies both to claims that you actually say and state on your package, but also claims you imply. For example, you may not say your product has real fruit in it, but if you show a picture of real fruit on your label, that's an implied claim that you're using real fruit. And it's been litigated a lot over the course of years. The primary or kind of the foundational trigger for FTC or FTC to take a look at whether or not you're in compliance or not is if there's a representation, so you make a statement or you omit a statement, so you don't make a statement to clarify to the average reasonable consumer what is in your product or what is potentially not in your product. So if there's a representation or omission and that representation or omission is material, it's big enough to matter. It's big enough that the average consumer would be persuaded by that statement or by that omission to purchase the product. For example, those are things you want to really make sure you've got evidence, you've got this what's called substantiation to be able to prove that claim is supported. So what kinds of claims can lead us into these kinds of potentially risky situations? Things like natural, clean, sustainable. We're seeing a lot more movement into these like eco-friendly products, right? I've seen statements of like planet positive, those kinds of things. They're subjective, they're hard to support, right? Um, the likelihood that you're going to have any sort of challenge is very likely going to come from a competitor. So if you're new to the market, just breaking in, and there are other competitors who have, established businesses, large market share, and you start stating something where you're making, say, a comparative claim against their product, taste our milk's better than XYZ's milk, um, you better have the required level of substantiation or the competitor is likely going to sue you, and then potentially FTC could also get involved. So we're really trying to avoid any vague language or any language that's going to either expressly or imply certain things about your product that you maybe think is true, but you don't have the level of documentation of scientific evidence, of studies, whether they're organoleptic studies like taste tests, those kinds of things, to point back to and say, this is why we're making this statement, versus it's just, something marketing thought up and we don't actually have concrete evidence to back it up. I mentioned, some of these planet positive, eco-friendly types of claims. These are known as greenwashing claims. FTC has some great guidance documents on their website about greenwashing claims and when you can safely make environmental related types of claims. I've seen a few cases recently where just the use of the color green in an image of a plant has been enough to cause at least a long-term litigation until the company finally decided to change its label. Originally, the label was red. They changed it to green. They reduced the sugar a teeny tiny bit from an exorbitant amount of sugar in this product to begin with, right? And so the lawsuit was really based on this is false and misleading because you've got plants, you've got green, you're saying healthier version, but it was like a 0.6% reduction in sugar levels, which the sugar levels at the reduced rate were still enough to, probably cause ADD in me for the rest of my life. So we've got to watch again for what is the total imagery. That's the litmus test. It's not necessarily the statement in the words that you make, but if you couple that with the green label, you add in the picture of that plant or the picture of that whole fruit when your product's really just flavored with an artificial fruity syrup, right? The totality is what matters. We have, as mentioned, FDA does regulate certain kinds of claims on labels, whether they be health claims, nutrient content claims, structure function claims. And you'll see here the level of scientific evidence that's needed to support these claims. Health claims have the most rigor. That's significant scientific agreement. That's a lot. That's a lot of science. That's a lot of years. You're probably not going to get there within a decade, and it ends up being codified. So there are health claims in the regulations that you can look up to see if you meet the requirements to be able to make, make those kinds of health claims. Structure function claims don't require pre-approval by FDA, whereas health claims do require pre-approval, but you still need that level of substantiation, and that requires that competent and reliable scientific evidence. So there's a lot of debate on what constitutes science. Is a sensory test science or not? I don't have the answers to these questions. I'm saying that if you've got the right controls, the breadth of the study, you're not just asking your 5 siblings what they think about the product you're making because they're also investors in your company. You start to see where I'm going with this, right? How objective was the pool that you're surveying? What level of science is being conducted by what level of scientist? What are the controls within those studies? So, we like to think we can, say a lot of these, types of things about our products. And if it's what's known as fanciful, kind of colorful language, that's okay. But as soon as you have something that you're saying on your product that's objective, that means it's measurable and it's verifiable. And trust me, someone's out there looking to see if they can penetrate that claim, very likely your competitor. It was interesting when Kathy had put up on her slides the kind of rate of increase in mislabeling recalls. We're up to what, 83 now. We're ahead of pace of what last year's annual average was. I read a recent post in LinkedIn that said perhaps one of the reasons for this is that FDA is getting with the AI game and they're doing more and more label reviews, leveraging certain AI related tools, and they're able now to much more quickly review more labels than one human being could at a time. And so that means it's also more sensitive. It's looking for like the more nuanced non-compliance situations as well. So I don't know if that has anything to do with it or not. But think about the power of AI and the power that your competitors and regulators and consumers even can leverage to say, is this product on the up and up? Is what they're saying supported? I think there's going to be more and more opportunity there for a lot of different stakeholders to be able to come in and try to punch holes in the claims that we're making. So making sure that you've got proper substantiation is hugely important. I mentioned this comparative claims, against a competitor product or even against your own. If you're making a comparison claim of, you have less sugar than your, regular version, there are rules around that too. You usually have to disclaim the percentage less. You have to be specific, and not, again, make a statement that's false or could be construed as misleading to the average consumer. Another thing too, we see sometimes is copying of the look and feel of a competitor's label. We see a lot of private label manufacturers that'll pick the same color scheme as the branded product, the branded owner product label. So I'm just making this up, but like think about, Oreos, right? They're kind of in this like blue and black lettering with a little bit of red on there. And if you create another cookie like that with the same color scheme, um, that's starting to creep into this false misleading advertising, trying to confuse consumers into thinking that you're the Oreo product. So we've got to be very careful about what are our competitors doing, what's their look and feel, so that we don't end up landing in a competition there. We also make advertising statements in digital marketing, right? We need to disclose influencer statements, testimonials, if there's subject to sponsorship, for example. So FTC is looking at those areas of advertising that you do on your website, on whatever type of social media platforms you might be leveraging. So lastly, some tips for compliance. Kathy mentioned it too, and I can't support this enough. Do an annual review of your labels, at least your key ones. Do a review of your labels anytime you have a known supplier change to make sure that that label is still accurate. Um, build substantiation files, have that scientific evidence you're relying on to make your claims readily available so that if you need to produce it, you have it. You need to have that substantiation, that scientific, substantiation completed before you make the claim, not when you get sued or get a cease and desist letter, for example. Train your marketing, your R&D, your product development people to flag risky language, to bring any proposed language they want to put on the product to you. And the best way to do that is have food safety and quality have a seat at the table in whatever new product development process you have. Some people use stage gate or other new product development kinds of models nowadays. But as long as there is someone, it could be legal who does a marketing and advertising compliance review and an FDA labeling review. It could be someone from food safety and quality or regulatory in your companies to be able to flag these kinds of things in combination with what Kathy was speaking about and my topic, so that it's not the 11th hour when the product's done, it's commercialized, it's ready to launch, here's the packaging, it's launching on Monday, and you're like, wait, there are 7 ways from Saturday non-compliances all over this product. And we wonder why food safety and quality ends up being the bad guy, right? We don't get the time. Invite your seat to this table early, so that, again, going back to Kathy's great point, you can save a lot of time, you can save a lot of cost, you can save a lot of brand and regulatory and legal liability exposure. So with that, I will turn it back over.
Thanks, Melanie.